been here before the previous lectures, welcome again. And for those of you not, I'm David Mason, Professor of Cultural Tourism at Sejong University. And we've been doing a series of lectures here about the greatest early masters of Buddhism in Korea during the ancient period, everything before the Goryeo dynasty, that kind of made Korean Buddhism to be Korean, made it what it is as a truly Korean type of Buddhism to the future. And we'll continue this series next spring. We'll get into the Goryeo dynasty, the great things that happened there and after. But in our first lecture, we covered Master Jajang, who kind of laid the foundation in the Shilla kingdom, the foundation of Shilla Buddhism, and started to make Korea into a Buddhist holy land. In the second lecture, we covered Wonggyo and Wisang, the two brother monks, the two Doban, who kind of really made a established Korean Buddhism and really started it flourishing. Both of them great geniuses. Now, those two were in the late 600s, Wonggyo and Wisang, and here we get to the late 800s. We skip ahead 200 years in this series to get to Master Doseon, one of the most famous of monks, although sometimes not even officially acknowledged by the National Buddhist Order as one of their great patriarchs, sometimes not listed, and we'll say why. But to me, he's one of the greatest and most important of these master monks. Okay, yes. That's good. Here is a ritual portrait of him, maybe the oldest one that exists at Guksa, uniquely double enlightened. Not just enlightened, but double enlightened. We'll tell you about that. We'll explain. And presaging the unification of Korean Buddhism by that double enlightenment. Okay. Architect of the Goryeo dynasty, Buddhist master of geomancy, Korean Pungsu-jiri Seoul. You've heard perhaps of Chinese feng shui, feng shui. Now this is Korean. Pungsu means the same thing as feng shui. It's the same Chinese characters, wind and water. And so, but it's the geomancy. We say in English, the science of geomancy, the formation of landscapes to make some places with a good fortune, some places with a bad fortune. This is partly scientific and real. We certainly acknowledge today there are some pieces of land that are very good for government, and like a government center, and other parts of land that are not good for that. Some places are good for farming, and some are bad for farming. Some places are good to have a factory or an electricity plant, and other places are bad for that. Like this, certainly some places are good to have a military fortress, a stronghold to protect the air, and other places are very bad for that. It wouldn't work. So just that kind of thinking, but then extending more and more into mathematical, scientific principles, and also just pure intuition, good fortune, bad fortune, in various things, and the concept of the Baekdu, which is the defining feature of Korean geography, the entire Korean peninsula. Okay, this is his name. The Doseon, that Do is the same as Tao, the Chinese character Tao, as in Taoism. Dogyo, as Koreans say, Taoism, the entire Taoist religion, that Tao. It's a very, very important word in all of Chinese thinking, Chinese philosophy and such. Do, abundance, that sun is like an abundance, a cornucopia, delivering great amounts. So you might say abundant Tao, or an abundance of Tao, or some way to translate this. Certainly an auspicious name. Guksa, of course, means national master, master of the nation, and Doseon is really our first national master here in Korean history. He wasn't even national master while he was alive, didn't really have that title, but posthumously, the Goryeo dynasty gave him that title as the first Guksa. Okay, he's also is known by these names, like many of the great master monks, have several appellations. Okay, now he's born, he had an auspicious birth, certainly from the Kim family, one of the kind of branch of a royal family of Shilla, distant, certainly aristocracy, born in the Spirit Rock County on the slopes of Wulchusan Mountain, which is in Yongguang City today, which is nothing much of a city except for some tourism, and I think it has a nuclear power plant there. There's some rumor he descended more directly from royalty, but we don't know for sure that. His mother had this dream that she swallowed a pearl, a shiny pearl, and during her pregnancy she was vegetarian and chanting Buddhist scriptures and etc. from the scripture to make a more blessed baby boy, and it worked. He was really brilliant, supposedly. Ever since he was a toddler, people noticed his intelligence is brilliant. He could read Chinese characters from a very young age and was writing Chinese characters by the time he was 3 or 4 years old. The kind of baby that every Korean parent wishes that they had today. And it seemed in some way he was left somewhere on the mountain on Wulchosan, and birds protected him. Still today at Wulchosan in the national park, there is Bird Rock. There's Bird Rock, a little shrine there where people celebrate this thing. He's been associated with birds all of his life, as we're going to see in several ways, and even his funerary remains monument, rather uniquely decorated with birds. And the Guksa National Master Rock, that's what they call the Bird Protection Rock, also behind Guksa, still there. Okay, Wulchusan, really beautiful place. This mountain he was born at, and where he grew up to be a teenager and became a Buddhist monk. Incredible beauty. It's one of the national parks of Korea today, way down deep in South Jeolla province, and really highly recommendable to visit. The mountain hiking here is just amazing. Now, he spent the later part of his childhood at Bodhisattva of Wisdom Hermitage, Munsuam, on the western slopes of Wulchosan. That has been rebuilt and still exists. First get his hair cut off to become a monk at Wulnamsa, on the southeast side of that mountain. Okay. And here, once again, if you're a picture of when I was up there mountain hiking, this is 25 years ago. It's still like that. It's a little bit of, they call it the Kungang-san of Cholanamdo, Sokungang-san. Small diamond mountains of Cholanam. It's pretty amazing. But then he left there. That mountain wasn't good enough, and there wasn't any great temple there. He was a very ambitious young monk, only 15 years old, and he left and he went to exquisite wisdom mountains, Jirisan, the holiest, most sacred mountain in South Korea today, the end of the Baekdudaegan, the great mother mountain of the Korean nation, a very spiritual, amazing place with more than 100 religious institutions on the slopes of this mountain, more than 100. I still haven't photographed all of them yet. Still working on it. But see my website for like 75 pages about this mountain. How amazing it really is. Yes. Okay. He joined up as a monk at 15 years old at Hwaomsa to study Hwaom Buddhism. If you were here at the last lecture, you know that Master Wisang Josa brought the Hwaom Buddhism from China to Korea, planted it in Korea. This is called Huayan Buddhism in China. It's one of the great schools of Chinese philosophical Buddhism. Now, let me explain. We're accustomed very much today to Zen Buddhism and Sunbulyo, as we call it in Korea, but that's quite different. This is the earlier kind of Buddhism before that developed earlier, of a scholastic study Buddhism. Hua-Om Buddhism is one of those Buddhisms where you spend your life, basically as a monk, study. You read what the Buddha said and what other people said about that, essays explaining what the Buddha said, and you memorize it, and you get to debate it and really deeply understand it, and when you finally master this philosophy and you know every part of this philosophy and can explain it perfectly, then your master gives you a piece of paper that says you are enlightened in this kind of Buddhism, Hua-Om Buddhism or Tiantai Buddhism or one of the other kind, and then you are qualified to teach the next generation. This kind of Buddhism is just like today, going to university and studying through and getting your master's degree, and then you get your PhD. And when you finally have mastered your subject absolutely, and they interview you and you write your dissertation, and then they give you a piece of paper that says you are enlightened in this area, whatever scientific field or humanities or whatever, and then you are qualified to teach the next generation. You can become a professor. This kind of Buddhism is just like that. Most students spend about 20 years studying until they could get enlightened. It took me generally, the average, around 20 years of study until you completely understood the Hua-Om philosophy enough that you could get that piece of paper and graduate. He was accepted by the greatest master in this time of Hua-Om Buddhism, which had been running almost 200 years in Korea. Almost 200 years at this temple already, when he was a student there. Okay, he got his first enlightenment there. He attained the wisdom of Hua-Om philosophy in just 3 years. 3 years of study instead of 20. 3 years, and his master interviewed him, and he wrote his paper, and the master said, "Oh, you got it, you know it. You are enlightened." He was only 18 years old, and he was proclaimed enlightened and qualified to teach the next generation. This is really a prodigy. He was given the name Yangi because that was the founder of Hua-Om Temple in 544, supposedly, according to legend, and that's a very honorable thing, named after the founder of the temple. They gave notes. All right, he's 18, and he already has this supreme achievement. But then, he's not satisfied. This is at Hua-Om, one of the greatest treasures of Korean Buddhism, and standing inside that pagoda, the figure inside in the middle, in between the 4 lions with 4 different faces, that's Master Yangi. Master Yangi, and in front of him, Master Wisang or some other disciple of Hua-Om Buddhism who is bowing towards him. This is one of the greatest physical treasures of Korea. One of the greatest, I guess next to the top, the greatest single pagoda system there. It's at that temple. Now then, he's not satisfied, okay, being a fully enlightened teacher by 18, he, by 20, already respected as a wise person, which is very unusual. Most people at 20 are just wild and crazy. Still then, he began to study Sun, Zen Buddhism, under the greatest master of that time, who was also nearby Jirisana, Heianza, Heichel, Jungzonza, Master Heichel. Now, Zen Buddhism is just the opposite of scholastic Buddhism. Bodhidharma, 500 AD in China, made this revolution against scholastics, against this 20 years of studying books. Bodhidharma came in and said, no, throw all the books in the fire. You don't need any book. You can be illiterate. It doesn't matter. You sit down and meditate. Just meditate. Intensive, heavy meditation until you wake up. You don't learn about what the Buddha said. You become a Buddha yourself. That's the idea. You become a Buddha, a living, walking, talking Buddha. So that's Zen Buddhism. That started 500 AD in China, and it came to Korea around 800. Right around 800. During the 800s, slowly built up in Korea and flourished. and it was an enemy of the scholastic Buddhism, the Tiantai and the Huaong Buddhism, you know, that each one said, oh, you guys are fake, that's not real enlightenment, as such. But he went over there, 20 years old, and became disciple of the greatest Zen master, as such. Got this under Hecho. And this is where he was, that nowadays the entrance way, and that is the Budo, the funerary monument of Hecho, Master Hecho, one of the greatest Zen master of the 800s and such. A very beautiful temple, great place to visit, very private place. Second Enlightenment then comes 3 years later. In just 3 years, most students might sit there for 10 years, 15 years of meditation, heavy, intense meditation until they wake up, and that's still true in Korea today. The monks following the Zen path, it may take you 10 years or 15 or 20 until you reach that high enlightenment. Again, in 3 years, 3 more years, Doseon accomplishes that. He's only 21, 22 years old, something like that, and he's enlightened in Huaong Buddhism. He's enlightened in Zen Buddhism. Now, he's double enlightened, therefore, in both scholastic and the Sun Bulgyo. And so, therefore, this hundreds of years later, Doseon Guksa brings that together, the scholastic Huaong Buddhism and the Sun Bulgyo Zen Buddhism. He brings those together and makes the Jogye order of Korean Buddhism that combines the best of both of those. And that's what this university is about, and that's what Korean Buddhism generally is about. But that happened hundreds of years later. He helped to pave the way. It's an important step along the way that he was enlightened in both the scholastic and the Zen schools, showing that you could do that and making such an example. Then he's still not satisfied. He's still only like 21, 22 years old. He's double enlightened, accomplished more than anyone ever already in the history of Buddhism. He's the only such figure that is officially enlightened in both schools until, like, you get to Doseon Guksa, and said even he was not officially enlightened in the scholastic style. As such, he's really the only one in history that is officially got both pieces of paper from two different masters that did this. Now, he's still not satisfied. It's still not enough. He wants more. So he goes to China for the higher level teachings, esoteric teachings, secret teachings, and including Taoism. He goes to Taoist masters in China. Taoism's kind of an enemy of Buddhism in China. They're two different religions. They both have temples, they both have monks, they both say, we are better than you. As such, they have disputed all through history, trying to get the favor of the emperor for one or the other. It's kind of like today, like in Africa, Christianity and Islam. They're both very strong and they're both competitive. In countries like Nigeria, they're both trying to get the people, and they're at war with each other, more or less violently, like that. But he, as a Buddhist master, he doesn't care. He goes to Taoist masters in China to get the teachings about the I Ching, the Koreans call the Juyukyung, and the Geomancy, the Feng Shui, which comes to be called Pungsu. Now, there's a few Koreans today, a few scholars, who try to say he never went to China. Because they want to say, just like Wonhyo, Master Wonhyo, he did everything here in Korea. He got all his enlightenment in Korea. There was no reason to go to China. Some people like to say it, but it seems a kind of nationalism, a national pride thing. We don't have any exact record of his travel in China. All we know is he went to China and he just studied these things and came back. We don't have any real records, so it's possible he didn't go to China. We don't know. In these days, in the 800s, the Shilla dynasty, the unified Shilla dynasty, was collapsing ever since after about 800. Things were getting bad. And so we don't have a lot of records. A lot of paper records were just never made, and many that were made were burned. were destroyed because Shilla collapsed into civil war, rebellion, chaos, and utter civil war for nearly 30 years at the end of it. And so just we don't have very many records at all from this era. So that's why we're not sure if he really went to China or not. People say he did. Okay, he came back to Korea, went back to Wulchusan, his original mountain, the mountain of his hometown, and he built Dogapsa Temple from the old Moonswam, the Bodhisattva Wisdom Hermitage, and renaming it Dogapsa. Today, it remains as one of the great Buddhist temples of Korea, one of the 108 great temples, great traditional temples of Korea. San Sachal said, if you want to know what that listing of 108 great temples, see my website to see the full listing. But it's one of those at Dogapsa. Here, these are the remains at Dogapsa later. This is what it looks like today. Last time I visited a while ago, and the monument, the great monument that's there, was made in 1653 by the under the royal government, the Joseon Dynasty government, authorizing that to honor Master Doseon. That Isak was made, and that was made out of text materials that no longer exist. So the inscription on the monument is very valuable to us from that 1653. Now, he was known to wander around Korea, just traveling around. Pathways, he would just go through villages and towns, visiting mountains, going across areas, trying to figure out Korea. Because in China, he learned of feng shui, the geomancy, the principles of mountains and rivers and wind and water, how it works. But then he came back to Korea and he realized that Korea is different from China. Well, duh, obviously. China's bigger. China's 50 times bigger in this gigantic landscape of many different mountain ranges and 2 giant rivers that flow from the west to the east. And Korea's totally different. It's a small little peninsula sticking out into the ocean with one main mountain system, one main unified mountain system, and many smaller rivers going from the East Coast, starting at the East Coast Mountains and running to the west, which is opposite from China, where the mountains begin in the west and go to the east. And so he realized that you needed a different system. You can't just use Chinese principles for understanding the Korean landscape. So he traveled around Korea just looking at everything, trying to figure it out. How is Korea constructed and how does the energy move, the energy flow? He was quite the wanderer, the traveler. Okay? He did, at the end of all that wandering, he returned to Jirisan to think about it, to try to put it all together, everything he could understand about Korea, and he built a hut near Nogodan. That's a friend of mine standing at the main shrine at Nogodan, and that's Nogodan Peak at the top left up there, the ancient grandmother crone peak, one of the female peaks of Jirisan, over on the west of Jirisan, a great place, very popular with hikers. He also is known to stay here, supposedly, at what's called the Four Sages Hermitage, because 4 great masters were known to meditate and practice here. Today it's a wonderful kind of tourist attraction, temple, a really great place to visit. And they claim to have at this temple the Doseon Cave, Doseon Guru, such. There, you see, right next to the mountain spirit shrine, the Sanchingak, there's that cave over on the left, and you see inside the cave. And people still today burn a lot of candles, incense, leave little Buddha statues offered for Doseon, for Master Doseon, remembering that he supposedly meditated in that cave. Now, supposedly, the Sanchin, the mountain spirit of Jirisan, appeared to him at Sanchart Village, which is down at the bottom of Nogodan area, at a village area near a stream at the very bottom there, not a famous place today. but they appeared to him, and that's a picture of the mountain spirit, Doseon. That's the painting that's in Hwalumsa Temple, one of my favorites. I even use it on my name card. And he gave him the deepest secrets of Pungsu-jiri, of the feng shui, to really understand the Korean landscape, and called it another method by which great bodhisattvas grant salvation to humankind. Notice, that's Buddhist religion. Now see, Pungsu-jiri, remember, feng shui, that's Taoist. It's a Taoist art. He learned it from a Taoist. In China, this is totally separate. In China, Buddhist monks do not do feng shui. Only Taoist monks do feng shui. It's a Taoist practice, and those religions are enemies. They keep separate. But, of course, when they're going to build a new Buddhist temple, they give money to a Taoist master to tell them the proper geomancy for building their temple. They do this. But here now, this legend by which the mountain spirit, the Sanchin, who is the #1 most characteristic Korean deity, right at the very center of traditional Korean culture and spiritual beliefs, the mountain spirit. There's nothing more Korean than the mountain spirit. And he teaches him the deepest secret of feng shui, of Pungsu, and such, as a bodhisattva practice, which means Buddhism, Buddhist religion. So this is how they are integrated. This is how Taoism gets integrated into Korean Buddhism and starts making Korean Buddhism really the most Taoist kind of Buddhism in the world. Because Taoism never became an established religion in Korea, not like the way it was in China. Buddhism became an official religion, but not Taoism. Therefore, they were not enemies. They were not enemies. And I can tell you some great stories about that a bit later, about the Taoist aspects of Korean Buddhism that make it so very unique in the world for that. Okay. Now, therefore, we get Pungsu-jiri. And those first two characters, Pungsu, wind and water, that's feng shui in Chinese, same thing, Pungsu-jiri Seoul. It's still alive today. There are many Pungsu masters today, working, operating, and such, and even big corporations like Samsung, when they're going to build a new factory or a new building down in Gangnam, they will consult a Pungsu master and give him money to give them advice. They do it kind of secretly because they don't want people laughing, but nobody would dare really make a new great building here without checking out and making sure about the local energy and where to put the front door and et cetera, how that flows. It's still alive and such. Now that's a shamanic painting of a Pungsu master. Kind of call that the spirit of Pungsu, the Pungsu-shin spirit and such. So for 1100 years, this has worked, and the Neo-Confucians of the Joseon dynasty very much followed this direction of Pungsu, such, as well as shamans practice it. Part of it's kind of shaman, Korean Taoists, about gardens, temples, buildings, everything. Doseon brought it to a national scale. Now see, this was never done in China. China's too big. Still today, even, really, you can't think about the entire nation of China. It's too big, it's too diverse. You can't get all that into your one brain. There's like 6 different climate regions in China. It's just too gigantic. So Chinese feng shui just concentrates on each local area. A city at most, maybe a province, but even a town, a village, somebody's private house. Feng shui is a just private house and a garden, small scale, relatively small scale. But Doseon was able to talk about a national Pungsu because Korea is small enough. You can kind of fit Korea in your pocket. You can. It's just the one peninsula. You can imagine Korea, and he did. You can imagine this on a national scale. And so he was not just giving people advice about where to put your garden and where's the front gate over here or maybe over there. That kind of feng shui sort of local energy flow advice. Not only that, but he was thinking on a national scale of national history, national arrangement, where to put military fortresses to best protect the nation, where new Buddhist temples should be built to focus energy in the right way, and what would be the next dynasties, the new dynasties of the nation. Now, something unique about him. His system is often called the Bibo Pungsu-jiri. It's often called Bibo Pungsu, such, and this way of modifying the landscape, teaching village level people or at cities or whatever to change the landscape somewhat, to go with the natural flow of how it's built, but to make some changes, especially in forests and stream pathways and such, to make a better life. There are some places around the nation it's thought that Doseon gave advice there to plant a new forest over here, or to plant a new channel of water through a garden over here, or building a pagoda right here in the center to strengthen the energy and in practical ways improve the life, like resolve flooding problems. At the city of Hamyang, the Hamyang town of Hamyang County, down north of Jirisan, there's the Bibo Soup, built there by Governor Che-Chi-wan. When Che-Chi-wan was the governor, I give a different lecture about him, and I wrote a book about him. You can see on my website, Che-Chi-wan, in the 800s, same time as Doseon. When Doseon visited there and gave him advice, the town had flooding. There was some bad flooding every spring, and Doseon showed him where and how to build a new forest, a ridgeline along the stream that stopped the flooding, diverted it elsewhere to the farm fields where it was needed, and saved the town from being flooded every spring. And they still have that forest today, and it's a park, and it's dedicated to this kind of idea. So this kind of thing, and there's a harmony with nature idea. This stuff is still studied by, say, the landscape architect people of Korea. They still make reference to these ideas that came from Doseon, and they go tour these places that he was known to have influenced for this idea of this Bibo Pungsu, of improvement of the landscape in order to make a prosperous Greek community, and including very great trees in these villages, saving them and honoring them. Now here we go to Gumosan, which is this is a provincial park near Gumi City, right in the middle of South Korea, right in the middle, northwest of Daegu City, such Gumi City, and there is a mountain there, and there's Doseon's cave. It was a cave, again, a cave where it's believed that he sat and meditated and contemplated there, and it's called Doseon Gul, and there's Buddhist shrine back there. People still come leave offerings. It's a very beautiful place to visit. Okay, now Doseon had the idea, the first one we know of, and other people might have had this idea, but we just have no record of it. Doseon is the first one we know who conceived of the Baekdu-daegan, and he didn't use that exact term. That exact term was invented a few hundred years later, but the Baekdu-daegan, the spine of Korea, a mountain system that really unites the entire peninsula. It starts way up north on the border with China at Great Baekdusan Mountain and runs down south to the south coast and defines the entire Korean peninsula. And this is a key theory of Doseon's thing, that he understood this one line of mountains, peak to ridge to peak to ridge. Water never crosses it. Water never goes across this. It's a continuous ridge line of mountains. All the rivers of Korea begin at the Baekdu-daegan and then flow down to the east coast, the south coast, or the west coast. Well, they all begin there at springs on the sides of the Baekdu-daegan. This is the unified hiking line, and now through 7 national parks. I think now it's 8 national parks, including Taebeksan, and 4 major local parks going through this. That's within South Korea. And within South Korea, this line is now a hiking trail, like the great Appalachian Trail of America or other famous long-distance hiking trails of the world. This is now a great one. Hikers begin at Jirisan, and you can walk all the way through Korea on one trail until you hit the DMZ, and then you gotta stop or they'll shoot you. Going right on through. 735 kilometers of trail going through there, and it's a wonderful thing and a great mountain hiking experience of Korea. It takes like at least 6 weeks to hike the entire thing. We really hope someday, we got the dream, that they're going to open up the DMZ fences someday and allow people to continue the Baekdu-daegan at least to the Diamond Mountains of North Korea, to Kumgangsan, and then even further. And someday, when we have some liberation going on here, you'll be able to hike from Jiri-san straight up to Baekdu-san. It would be possible someday. Okay. That's the spine of Korea. Along there, this is one of the great examples, a place discovered by Doseon. That's just a rock fall, a rock slide, but look, it's a tiger. It's a tiger, isn't it? It's a natural tiger along the Baekdu-daegan. It's in the mountains, yeah. Right. It's called Banyasa, which means wisdom temple. Wisdom temple is devoted to Pungsu-jiri. So only Doseon found this place, made it sacred. It's one of the many quirky little places along there. He finally, by the end of his career, Doseon settling at Baegunsan, not Jiri-san. It's the next major mountain south of Jiri-san, going to the south coast of Korea. Baegunsan, the White Cloud Mountain. He finally settled there and decided it was the best place for him to make his own temple and teach his disciples there. And such. It's it's in like Suncheon City or Gwangyang City that's next to it on the south coast. A very nice place to visit. There. He built Okryongsa, the Jade Dragon Temple. And taught there for 35 years as a teacher. He did some other travels around, but generally just teaching there, his disciples. Supposedly, this is at Unamsa now at Baegamsa. The Okryongsa temple, the Jade Dragon Temple that he built, does not exist. It was destroyed during history for hundreds of years. But they have excavated the ruins and believe they're planning on some kind of reconstruction in the future for local tourism purposes. It is said like this, talk about the Mubab, meaning the Dharma without Dharma, the Dharma of no Dharma, and the explanation without any explanation, the Musul, teaching really without words, which I would, as a professor, I kind of envy this. I think it would be much easier to do this. If I was like Doseon, I could just go into my classroom every day and just stare at the students. Look at them and say, "Move!" The students all go, "Oh, we understand. We understand. We got it." I don't know how to do that, but I'm pretty talkative, as you can tell. And such, but that is supposedly what he could do. He had that ability. And the king, King Hongang, invited him to the palace to lecture at Gyeongju, which was the highest honor a Buddhist monk could have then. We don't know, maybe he just went in front of the king and just looked at the king and said, "Boo!" We don't know. I don't know what he said. No records. Up here, right here in Seoul, he established 3 great temples. He established many temples during his life, and then he left instructions for establishing more. So altogether, there's 70 or 80 temples around Korea that are associated with him, that he either improved the temple or established it or recommended to establish it. And the greatest one in the Seoul area is the headquarters of Buddhism in the Seoul area, the greatest temple, the Temple of Master Cheongdam after the Korean War, who's the monk who modernized Korean Buddhism and reestablished it as a national force there, Cheongdam Guksa. And so this is his temple, and a very, very beautiful place at Sanggaksan mountain and such. This temple is named after him. And he supposedly, everything you see there now is built after the Korean War because of wartime destruction, but supposedly Doseon founded this place. It's right up in the far northeast of Seoul. And this is there. Supposedly, Doseon carved this image himself into the rock. And according to legend, there are no chisel marks. If you look up close with a microscope, it's really smooth rock. You can't find the chisel marks, and he just carved it out of the magic power using his wooden staff. We don't know. We don't know, but we think this does come from around 1,000 years ago. That iron shelter was built over there in the late Joseon dynasty to help protect it. It's regarded as the single most holiest rock carving that there is in the Seoul area remaining, and many people worship in front of here all the time. This is believed to have great supernatural power, especially before the national exams, the Sunung that we just had recently, the national college exam. This place is really, really crowded with mothers up there praying for their children to pass the exam. It has that reputation for success. So that's close up. Now, they say this is something of a controversy. They have a sign there saying that it's the Bodhisattva of compassion, Kwanseon Bosa. But scholars, including me, scholars of Buddhist art, we say it's the Amita Buddha. Amitabha. It certainly seems to be Amitabha, but they say it's Bodhisattva of compassion. It's a bit of a controversial who it is, but people worship there and believe in its powers. Also, Bongwonsa, this is over on the northwest. Doseonsa in far up northeast, but this is northwest. He also founded this temple, which is today the headquarters of the Taego order of Korean Buddhism. The Taego-jong, their headquarters. Doseon started this year. And Bulamsan, this mountain, that sharp pyramid-shaped mountain, is on the east side of Seoul. It's the eastern border of Seoul with Namyangju City. It's a very prominent, sharp mountain. You can always see that from a distance. And there is this temple, Bulamsa, there also with stone carvings on it. And he founded all three of these. These three are in like a semicircle, you understand, like a half-moon shape, from the east part of Seoul to the north part of, and then to the northwest. And such. You look at them on a map, they're in a curve like this. And so it's kind of focusing energy from you draw a line from those three temples meeting together right at downtown Seoul, which later became the capital of Korea. Those three temples with the rock carvings focusing the energy right down there to downtown Seoul, middle. This was intentional and such. This is a Namu Sangwan Daishin monument to take refuge in Amida Buddha, Namu Amitabul, but in this case, Namu Sanjin, taking refuge in the mountain spirit, a very radical kind of idea within Korean Buddhism. Oh, this shows you kind of the arrangement of the mountains, and see those three X in those mountains. Those are the locations of these three temples around Seoul that together focus in on the center of what we call downtown Seoul today. And then also down in the middle of Korea, another of the more famous practice temples, Cheongamsa, and then Sudo-am, one of the most famous places for deep meditation practice in Korean Buddhism, and another two of the 108 greatest temples of Korea. Doseon founded that. Now, this is the mountain spirit, the appearance of the temple. Lovely, great place to visit. That's near Kimcheon City. Now, this is the view out here at Sudo-am, up on top, near the top of the mountain, way up high, about 600 meters high. Very famous meditation hermitage. Okay, this is the map of that. And now the thing is, he was the advisor to Taejo Wangun, even though he was dead. But he still served as advisor to the first king of the Goryeo dynasty. He died by 898. Taejo Wangun started the Goryeo dynasty in the Civil War finished and the Shilla Kingdom ended, and Goryeo Dynasty starting at 935. So 37 years after Doseon was dead. But Doseon left instructions. He left a document of instructions to the next king of the next dynasty. This is an interesting thing about him. He was looking forward. As I said, while he lived, during the 800s, Shilla Kingdom was collapsing. It was going down for 100 years. The government was corrupt. It couldn't get anything done. Government kept losing money, losing power. There was corruption everywhere. It's a lot, kind of like the United States right now, a feeling of degeneration and collapse. The government just isn't functioning. Now this took 100 years. And during this time, many people, such as Chechiwan, as I mentioned before, Golden Chechiwan, he tried to save the kingdom. He tried to save the collapsing government. He suggested reforms. He suggested how they could stop the corruption and recover. And he failed. He failed, but he tried. Master Doseon, opposite. Interesting. Doseon had a feeling that kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall, and it's nature. It goes along with the Pungsu-jiri, the cycles of things. Kingdom, great dynasties and such, they rise, they become powerful, but inevitably they fall, they sink. Just like we've seen with America in the past 100 years. We had a really good time in the 20th century. We reached a high level, and now it's going down, and maybe that's just natural. No government ever lasts forever. No republic, no dictatorship, nothing. All these kingdoms, every kingdom comes to an end. The great dynasties of China, the Roman Empire was maybe the longest one we ever had, but after 600 years, Rome was finished. This just naturally comes. And he knew that, so he didn't try to save it. He didn't try to stop the corruption or stop the collapse. He just made a plan for the next dynasty. He knew there would be a next kingdom. There would be a new kingdom to replace what was collapsing all around him. And he would just let it happen. And he made the plans for the future, for the next kingdom, the next government. And he left it behind. And indeed, the first king of the next kingdom, who conquered, was from the northern part of Korea, never met Doseon, anything, but he took up that document, took up that plan, and from the throne, when he was enthroned, Taejo Wangun, he told his people, he said, yeah, this plan, this is what we will do. Let's build the capital here, let's build the cities here, military fortresses here, and temples, Buddhist temples, new temples shall be built here and here, according to what Master Doseon said. So he was the architect, the posthumous architect of the Goryeo Dynasty. And it is said even that he predicted the birth of Taejo Wangun, that he passed by. There's a great little video clip that I don't have time to show you, but it was done in a Korean drama about Taejo Wangun, and showing this, where his father, Wangun's father, was building a house. As a young man, just newly getting married, started building a family house, and Doseon came by and gave advice about the house, where to put things exactly. And then he said, in this house will be born the king. There'll be a king born here in the next dynasty. The young man building a house just said, what? Crazy? He was a nobility, but certainly not going to become a king or anything. But yeah, he was married, and in that house, Taejo Wangun was born, grew up, become a great warrior, and made the Goryeo Dynasty, supposedly by Doseon's prediction. But this is just kind of a myth. Okay, and all these things, Taejo Wangun did order that these sites be built according like Doseon had said. And we have even more about that. His Songak-san mountain, just across the DMZ. If you go visit the DMZ, look through the fence, you can see Songak-san mountain in the distance. It's quite prominent. That's what became the capital of the new Goryeo Dynasty. The town of Songak became Gaeseong. Gaeseong, capital for 480 years, and he predicted that there would be further dynasties. Doseon knew that even the Goryeo Dynasty would end someday the dynasties don't last forever, and he predicted a yet future areas such as Hanyang, which is what we call downtown Seoul today, right here, and then even later the Sugawon area of Gyeongsan, south of Gyeongsan Mountain near Daejeon City, which has an interesting story about how that was destroyed later. But this happened. He made improvement. Doseon supposedly visited temples that he had been to before and others. Hwaumsa, where he got his first enlightenment when he was just 18 years old. He supposedly designed and had these monuments built, the twin pagodas of the courtyard, and that stone lantern, which is the biggest traditional ancient stone lantern in Korea, the largest one, and of excellent setting. And all of these are national treasures today, supposedly built by Doseon. And other places, other temples. I don't have time to show you all the pagodas, different arrangements and such that he supposedly made. Some of it was explicitly anti-Japan, which relates to current politics today. Some of the places Doseon established, so it was to focus energy, military energy, defensive energy towards the southeast from Jirisan in the direction of the southeast to protect Korea. Meaning, from Jirisan pointing towards like Busan City for Korea's protection. Already this was a major problem, even way back then, protecting against those island pirates out there, such. Now, he's recorded to have died in 898, as far as we know, and sitting in the meditation position in front of his students. That's the true way for a Buddhist master to die. You make your final pronouncement, your final words, boo, or some such, and then you just in meditation and you just die. Huiming, the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, famously died like that, and it's the classic way for a Zen master to die. But no Budo is there. No Budo, the funeral monument, the ashes monument. There is no such Budo around there. So it could have been stolen, it could be missing, or maybe it never was. Okay? Guksa at Jirisan has this Budo that has no name on it. The Bisuk, whatever, was broken, destroyed, lost somehow. No real name on there, but this does remain there. And it is unique in Korea in that it has birds. But there on the filial, on the top, there's stone birds flitting around the top there. You see it on the right side. Stone birds. This is the only Budo from ancient times in Korea that has birds on it. The only one, and Doseon always associated with birds. Supposedly in his walking around Korea, exploring, that his spirit could fly up like a bird and observe the land from above, like a bird does. That's how he got his Daegan understanding, his understanding of Korea's landscape. So the birds, they're on that, which make it that many people believe that this is the Budo of Doseon there. And also the turtle at the base here, you notice the stele is missing, the Bisuk is gone, it's missing, that's why we don't know. But this turtle, and turtle has bird wings on it. Look at that. Bird wings on the base of the turtle. This is the only one in Korea, at least from traditional times. Before modern, this is the only one in Korea where the turtle has got bird wings. And so the heavy association with Doseon with birds, people tend to think that, yeah, this is the remains of his funeral there. Some believe that he's not really dead. He became a spirit immortal of the Taoist type, a Shinsan, Taoist-style spirit immortal, and continued to advise Taejo Wangun and even Muhak Wangsa, founder of Seoul. Right now, this is 500 years later after Doseon, when the master monk Muhak, who was very famous for his Pungsu-jiri understanding, and the army general Lee Sung-gae makes an army coup d'etat, military coup, takes over, destroys the Goryeo dynasty, kills the royal family, and he proclaimed a new kingdom, a new dynasty for Korea called the Joseon dynasty. And he asked his advisor, his good friend, was Master Muhak, and he asked Muhak to find the new capital. So Muhak studied Doseon's writings and then traveled around Korea looking for the new place, and supposedly right here at Wangsinmi Station is the actual place where Muhak was there, and an old man, an old farmer, came up to him. Muhak was there with his royal guard and his soldiers searching for the new capital, and an old farmer, old man, comes up and says, monk, hey you monk, what are you looking for? And Muhak very insulted, you know, hey, do you know I'm advisor to the king? I'm such an important man, you don't talk to me like that. But he said, well, I'm looking for the new capital of Korea. You know, and the old man says, Wangsinmi, meaning just go 10 more li, proceed 10 li that way. He was pointing down the Cheonggyecheon stream, upstream, on the Cheonggyecheon. So you go 10 li that way. And Muhak, well, who the hell are you? You're just a farmer. How can you tell me anything like this? And so, but then he traveled with his men 10 li. They counted up, and they ended up at the site of Gyeongbok Palace. And Muhak there is standing there, looking around, saying, "Oh my God, yes, this is it. Look at the mountain, the river, the stream. This is it. This is the place, the new capital." And then he wonders, well, who is that old man? Who's that farmer that told me his way? And he rushed back there with his military guards. Rushed back to that village out there where what is today the giant Wangsinmi station and shopping complex, right? And the village people there said, no, there's no old man here. There's no old man like that. Nobody looks like that. Nobody here. And then Master Muhak, he realized, oh my God, that was Doseon. That was Doseon's ghost. It was Doseon's spirit that appeared as the old man and told me where to find it. And he did. That's the story of why Seoul is in Seoul. That happened. Why Wangsinmi Station is called that. Right near Wangsinmi Station is the Muhak Bridge, Muhak-yo, that commemorates the exact place where they supposedly met. But it was Doseon's advice of location. Now, 70 temples, large and small, all around Korea, 70 temples. Nobody has more temples than this associated with them. We sang about 60, Wonjo about 66. And so here are about 70 that either he started or he recommended to start, or he vastly rebuilt. There's 70 temples claim their association with Doseon. Only a few of them we really have the true evidence, but most of them still going, still thriving. So a good location for a temple. It was a good place. He was right. All the many temples that have been lost by history, but 70 you can still visit. Now, 22 of those are what Taejo Wangun did, and they're called Bibo Sachal because they improve the landscape. That Bibo Pungsu-jiri idea. These are called the Bibo Sachal of Doseon. They improved the local area energy by that, including those 3 temples at the north of Seoul that focus the energy into Hanyang. Okay, dozens of pre-existing temples that he improved, and then a dozen stone-carved Buddha figures or pagoda. They said that Doseon built that. They're all over Korea. So many different places. All through the rest of Korean history, Doseon's Pungsu-jiri has proven dominant and still goes on. The great Pungsu masters of today usually try to claim that they have a lineage, teacher-student from Doseon to themselves. They can't prove it. Nobody really has any names. If there was any such lineage, it's secret lineage, whatever. We don't know the names, we don't have the evidence, but they claim it. And shamans who practice Pungsu-jiri today, they said they imagine the spirit of Doseon. They try to get Doseon to inhabit them, and then channel his words out that. He's still the main man. Now, this is a Pungsu master right today, right here in downtown Seoul, who claims descent from Doseon. You know, the teacher-student to him in a secret lineage. He claims that he's got all the Pungsu maps up on the wall, and etc. Park Min-chan, he claims, I don't know. He seems, and this is something, Pungsu, the practice of Pungsu, some of it's kind of like scientific, using a compass, like we just saw here, a compass ring, and numbers, numerology, and searching the directions of the exact landscape and measuring things to find a tomb. And some of it's very intuitive. Some of Pungsu is just like looking at a mountain and saying, oh, this mountain seems to be a laying down cow, and that hill over there is shaped like a magpie. It seems like a magpie to me, and the magpie is nagging the cow to stand up, and so therefore that means the energy of this place will be good on the west side for raising a family, and the farm field should be over here on the east. Intuition, just imagine it, just getting the idea in your brain. That's very shamanism, very basic. Some people are really calculating numbers and drawing maps and making it rather scientific. Other people are just purely intuitive. Many Pungsu-jiri associates use both together in various combinations. It's not so exact, but plenty of people like him are still operating. This is on the walls of his office, different diagrams that he has made of certain areas to figure out the proper placement. It is said that politicians in Korea use this very much, to like moving their father or their grandfather's tomb to a better location in order to win the election. Very famously, Kim Dae-jung, former president, ran for president 4 times. He lost the first 3 times, and supposedly after each time he lost the election, he employed a Pungsu master like this to give him a new location. He moved his father's tomb to a new location, and then he run for president again and lost. But finally, on the 3rd try, when he moved his father's tomb for the 3rd time, and then he won, he was president of Korea, and that Pungsu-jiri master made a whole lot of money after that. He became very famous for having a winner like that. But politicians supposedly still do this, although often they would deny it if you ask them directly, because they don't want to seem to be superstitious or whatever. If President Moon employed a Pungsu-jiri master, I don't know. Apparently not a very successful one. Anyway, and for more information on this, for what I think is the best, or the only so far real English explanation of Pungsu-jiri principles, and the biography of Master Doseon, as I've just told you, is on my website thing. And I'm going to try to make this into a book sometime in the future, in the next few years. I'm going to publish another one of my books, maybe about him, telling this whole story like I told you here, but getting into some academic detail as far as we can. And that's it. That's the lecture, that's the story.
Whether they have passion for it.
Of course. So, question time.
So is the Shinsan also it's Sanchin or Shinsan?
Well, Sanchin is mountain spirit,
Yeah.
and Shinsan is spirit immortal, which is a Taoist concept. That's a human being person who becomes an immortal.
Yes, so the Shinsan.
Hmm.
That also has shamanist importance too, doesn't it?
Not really, it's more Taoist. It's Chinese Taoism, but became a solid belief here in Korea. And then the idea of shamanic spirits, because a Shinsan can become a shamanic spirit, like a Sanchin. Some Shinsan, a person who died at some particular mountain or whatever, later a shaman is doing shamanism and they have a vision. If a shaman has a vision of some figure, some person or animal, whatever, then that becomes a shaman god. If they have a vision of it, if they see it and talk to it, then it becomes one for them and for their disciples. So you do have stories around Korea that some person became a Shinsan in some area, kind of an immortal spirit, and then later some shaman has a vision that, oh, that's the mountain spirit here. King Danjong, for example, Danjong who was killed by his uncle Sejong. His tomb is out in Yongwol County, the farthest away royal tomb, and he supposedly became Sanchin. After his death, he was seen as a Shinsan, as a living ghost, but then he went over to Taedeksan, Mount Taedeksan, and became Sanchin there, and there is a Sanchinga for him there at Taedeksan. People worship there for that. That can happen. Can be, but there. Let's say Shinsan is kind of in between a Sanchin and a human being. It's one of the in-between steps.
So Taoism, the figures of Taoism then became incorporated by shamans.
Yes, and particularly because Taoism wasn't a religion in Korea. It didn't become an established religion. So Taoist artworks, Taoist deities, Taoist figures were used by the others, by shamans, definitely, and by Buddhists. It came into Buddhist temples, and by the Neo-Confucians in their practice, and such absorbed the Taoist things. One story I love is that going to one of the greatest Buddhist temples in Korea and visiting a master there, Gunil Sanim, at the great Busoksa temple. Busoksa, one of our greatest temples, and he was one of the greatest enlightened Buddhas of Korea. He's dead now, but back then, 15 years ago, visiting him and having tea with him. He invited me to his office to have tea, and while I'm sitting there in his office, I'm looking at the bookshelf, like you usually do when you're visiting some great. You look over the books they have, and I saw a Taoist book, the Do Dok Kyung, or a Tao Te Ching, as we say in English, Tao Te Ching. The main book of Taoism was sitting on his shelf, a very beautiful leather-bound, gold-embossed edition. And so I was joking, just making a joke, while we're having tea and light conversation. Just say, hey, why do you have this book? And he didn't understand me. Like, what do you mean? What's wrong? And I kind of explained that he could speak a little English, and I speak a little Korean. I have to explain to him, and then I'm making a joke here, because it's a different religion. It's like as if I see a Christian Bible sitting on his desk, I would say, hey, what's this? What are you doing? So the Lao Tzu book, the Tao Te Ching, and I said, what's it say? And different religion. And he said, no. He understood what I meant, and he said, no. Same wisdom, same enlightenment. Which I found astounding. See, in China, nobody would ever say that. That's like a Christian minister saying, Islam is also the true God. Is that a true religion or something? No, Buddha is the same as Jesus. You wouldn't say that. It's a different religion. These are enemy religions. Nobody in China would say that. But here in Korea, yeah, the greatest Zen master in Korea, same wisdom, same enlightenment. He acknowledges that. That's how much Taoism is integrated into Korean Buddhism. Many Korean Buddhist monks study the Chinese Taoist texts for deeper understanding. It's part of it. That's a big question. But basically in high school in Michigan, USA, in a suburb where we had no Asian people and no Asian culture, but in high school we studied about China, and I kind of got hooked. The ideas of Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, it was so different from American culture, very, very different. I got fascinated. So I came over here to find Chinese stuff, but I found Korea by accident and started learning about this stuff. And spent my entire life here doing this somehow. That's it.
My second question, actually, Pungsu-jiri is about it's a study about the shape of the wind or energy of the space. But actually, there is another type of study about the mechanics. It is a Chinese metaphysics.
Yeah.
Five elements.
Yeah. Not so much. That's very complicated. That's very hard to understand in Chinese character. The cycles, I alluded to that somewhat in that Doseon believed as with many other Pungsu-jiri masters, that kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall, and it's perfectly natural. And in fact, it goes by kind of a schedule. You can even predict in advance when they're going to reach the peak and when they're going to collapse, and etc. If you know the principles well enough and such. And yeah, that kind of thing. But then that goes into a lot of the only really way we have to understand that now is certain texts of the Joseon dynasty, and very little of that has been put into English and translated to English. It's really difficult to understand in Chinese characters, and I have little hope. I believe there's one book out now where some great professor has tried to explain this stuff in English. I'm not sure. I haven't got the book yet. It's new. It's called The Foresight of Dark Knowing, if you want to know. Amazon.com or something. Foresight of Dark Knowing. It's about the Joseon dynasty fortune telling based on these kind of principles, like she said. Based on that. It's very difficult to get that in English. Maybe before I retire, I will try to understand that. Include it. Okay. Excuse me, one more.
In my baby days, the child young, and I was told the sport that went on mountain, that that they could see the country that old man wearing white clothing. And it doesn't imagine the people or the can we understand that what is physically the tangent existed?
Well, I think that mountains do have spirits. Each mountain has kind of a different individual character, an arrangement that makes a particular just kind of mood and energy around that particular mountain. Whether or not mountain spirits exist, I don't know. I've studied Korean mountain spirits for 35 years. I've never seen one. I've been in the mountains, I've been in the shrines, I've done the praying and bowing and rituals, all that. I haven't seen a mountain spirit, but I've met quite a few Koreans who tell me they have seen one. Shamans and other people, Buddhist monks and other people said, oh yeah, I saw the Sanjin over there, he's here. I don't know. I'm not judging about that. Maybe someday before I die, maybe I'll see one.
Is the story about Wu Pa and his group and Wang Xu and the direction Wang Xu need, is that documented in this?
Yeah, that's in the official chronicles of the founding of the Joseon dynasty, in the Joseon Shillok, as it's called, right near the beginning, in the stories of how they found it. It's there. And then popular folklore has embellished it somewhat. There's just in Chinese characters, there's just a few scant details, perhaps, but the basic parts of the story are there. Wuhan founded that. Okay, thank you everybody who remains. Jeez, most of them